On March 17, 2005, more than 15 months before the rise of Islamic Courts Union, a heated parliamentary debate over President Yusuf's request in Addis Ababa for 20,000 peacekeeping troops degenerated into a bloody brawl. The brawl erupted when Somali MPs were debating whether to allow the troops from neighboring countries, specifically Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Kenya, to be part of the peacekeeping mission for Somalia.
Mogadishu has been reduced to rubble by a 16-year cycle of conflict involving local warlords and sharp U-turns in American foreign policy. First, the Americans intervened but clashed with the warlords. Then after 9/11, they decided to hire some of them as bounty hunters chasing terror suspects. War-torn Mogadishu, Washington claimed, had become a haven for Al-Qaeda. By January this year, the residents of Mogadishu decided that they'd had enough and backed the Islamists to rise up and defeat the warlords. This is one of the places in Mogadishu where a decisive battle took place between the US-backed warlords and the UIC forces. Fighting raged in the city between January and June when the UIC finally took control of the capital. By then, Somalia's long civil war had claimed 500,000 lives. We arrived at Mogadishu's port. During the civil war, this was devastated by fighting, a focus for competing factions trying to control the country's economy. Now there is only one faction in charge, the Union of Islamic Courts, or UIC. 50 ships have been here in the last couple of months, and they're able to deal with about 100,000 bags of food every day. The Islamists, backed by rich Somali businessmen, are trying to get the economy back on track. It's run by the Islamic courts, and you think that they're operating very well to get the country's economy working, do you?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. That's very clear. There's not any doubt.
So as a result, the Islamic courts are very popular because presumably the price of food is going down.
Yeah, they are very popular.
We discovered that the Shabab had arrested a gang of pirates on the high seas. These chaps with their heads bowed, looking rather sheepish, are the pirates. There are 8 of them. There was a firefight when the Islamic court militias boarded the ship that was carrying charcoal to the Gulf. And they very smartly went after the pirates, boarded the ship and brought them back to port. The militants are keen to show that they're capable of establishing law and order by ending all forms of banditry. This is a huge publicity coup for the Islamic court forces. There were 60 acts of piracy off Somali waters last year, making it the worst place in the world for piracy. Even leading officials from the Islamic courts had turned up to celebrate the arrests. Back in Mogadishu, for the first time in their lives, these kids are enjoying peace. But that might be short-lived as war and famine loom again. Why? The West refuses to engage with the Islamists despite their control of the capital. It has sided with the Ethiopian-backed government instead. Already, fighting has broken out on the front lines. Today, in this post-9/11 world, there's an Islamic revolution taking place here in Mogadishu. It was the Islamic courts, not the Americans or the United Nations, that ended the anarchy and began to re-establish the economy. But now Somalia sits at a crossroads, and there are fears of a fresh, terrible regional conflict.
The capital of Somalia is becoming a ghost city as residents flee fighting between government forces backed by Ethiopian troops and fighters still loyal to the Islamic Courts Union. The United Nations says more than 320,000 people have fled Mogadishu in recent weeks. Many have no shelter and little or no access to water, food and medical care. Human rights workers say nearly 300 people have been killed in a week of fighting in the capital. As Mohammed Ado reports, it's all contributing to a humanitarian crisis.
The suffering of the displaced is beyond description. With no proper shelter, women and children, some just days old, live under trees. The same missiles that sent them fleeing from the city are following them to their makeshift camps.
They shelled us last night. The missile fell down there. We had to run away and seek cover elsewhere. We only came back much later.
With no medical facility nearby, the sick have to live with the pain, and pregnant women have to deliver in the open. This woman is in labor. The only assistance she has is these women who have no medical experience.
We are helpless. This woman is in labor. 5 babies have now been born and we can't get them to hospital.
This mentally ill man has been chained to a tree. His relatives fear he will wander away and get lost. A sharp rise in incidents of rape have also been reported as marauding militiamen take advantage of the helpless women who have no protection. Helpless as they are, they still...
Channel 4 News has obtained an exclusive document revealing America's role in the planning and execution of last month's Ethiopian invasion of Somalia. It reveals the US having to do close business with a government whose human rights record has so recently been condemned. As Jon Snow discovered, it's a document no one was very keen to discuss at the African Union summit in Addis Ababa today.
Ethiopia is a deeply religious country. Obedience to a mainly Coptic Christian God has transcended politics down the ages. But this energetic nation also sports a well-trained army. And when Islamic fundamentalists finally seized power in next-door Somalia, this was the resource America turned to. The American embassy is perched beside a dual carriageway high above the square. Channel 4 News has learned that behind these green barricades, 6 months ago, the blueprint for a very American-supported Ethiopian invasion of Somalia was hatched. We have obtained a UN record of a meeting in which the US Commander of the Fleet of Somalia, Rear Admiral Richard Hunt, the US Assistant Secretary for Africa, Jendai Frazier, discussed together key scenarios. The worst-case scenario reveals if there were a radical Islamist takeover of Somalia, the US would not allow it. Secondly, in the event of an Ethiopian rapid in-and-out intervention, the US would rally with Ethiopia if the jihadists took over. The aim would be to safeguard the transitional government at that time holed up in the provincial town of Baidoa. The American Assistant Secretary is recorded as cautioning it would be a mistake for the international community to condemn such an invasion. The senior UN official concludes in this document that any Ethiopian action in Somalia would have Washington's blessing. The American Assistant Secretary, Jendai Frazier, happens to be in Addis for the African Union summit. I asked her how long the Ethiopian invasion had been an option.
I don't think it was an option at all. I think Ethiopia was trying to support the transitional federal government.
We were protecting our own security.
But we've seen a UN document detailing a meeting at which you were present, in which the capacity of Ethiopia to do what they did was seriously questioned. In a sense, you'd have to green light it, wouldn't you? I mean, you'd have to know it was going to happen. Yeah, but you had fleets at sea, you had people in the air, you had capacity.
America's forces are deployed globally. I mean, we can move fast. And I think that's a lesson for everybody.
The transitional federal government of Somalia is currently in a hotel room in Addis Ababa, almost all of them fresh from exile in Britain. They intend to take over as they are. You did this with Ethiopia, but also the Americans have been very much...
Well, somehow they helped us.
How did they help you?
It's enough.
United States,
know
they gave them the green light.
Yes.
We didn't need their green light and they didn't ask for their green light. We were protecting our own security, and it's the right of every nation in the world to protect its security according to international law.
But it would have been awkward if they had not agreed with it.
We obviously, as friends, tell them what we're trying to do, try to explain things to them. If they agree, fine. If they don't agree, then if we feel it's very important for our own national interest, we go ahead and do it.
But obviously, given that they're going to give money to a force which is going to do the peacekeeping, they must approve, basically, of the action you took.
Otherwise, they've been very helpful. They've been very helpful in terms of diplomatic support. They've been very helpful in terms of sharing of intelligence with our military forces. So on the whole, they have been very helpful. We have no complaints there.